Hello and welcome to the second annual International Neuropalliative Care Society meeting. It's my pleasure and honor to be president of the society and to deliver my second presidential address. This one will tie to the theme of the meeting, namely the importance of breaking barriers and building community to improve care. By way of disclosures, I have received support from this work from several sources, and for people in the audience who may be interested in research or a research career, definitely feel free to reach out to me or to others in our community. We have a very active research committee, and we are always looking for ways to support research and researchers that's tied to neuropalliative care. I would also say that for those of you who are new to the field, to not be intimidated by that slide. I've had many more grants rejected than accepted. And for those of you who have been in the field a while, let's look forward to supporting each other in our rejection and to stay strong and to support each other and going forward, because the work that we're doing is important, whether or not reviewers see it the first time around. I'd like to remind people in the audience and welcome new people to the audience that we really are participants in the birth of a new field of medicine. We are seeing palliative care and neurology united in a way that really has not been united before. And we are building this on the shoulders of giants, several of whom we are going to recognize in our meeting, including Kathleen Foley. But this is an important time in that by calling this a new field, we are making it clear to everybody, both within neurology and palliative care, that there are unique needs that we need to meet, and that we need to do research, education, clinical work, and advocacy in order to see the patients and families succeed with some very difficult and challenging situations. Our society and community is well off the ground. We are actually ahead of my initially ambitious schedule. We have a very solid infrastructure, and that's thanks to GMP Group. And I would specifically like to thank Brennan, Joanne, Candace, and Katie, who have been instrumental in getting our society off the ground. We have a website which is looking beautiful and has a lot of great information. I'd welcome you to check it out. We have a growing membership and a very active membership. We have active committees, and I would encourage people to check out these committees and see if there is an area that you'd be interested in contributing. Our annual meeting is off the ground, and we will be having our first in-person meeting next year. And we have also gotten awards and a research pilot grant program off the ground. So definitely ahead of where I would have hoped we would be at this point in time. I'd also like to highlight some cool, new, and innovative work that's being done by members of our community. Neha Kramer, Jessica Brespris, and the Education Committee have done some amazing work, including this past June, getting an Education in Palliative and End-of-Life Care Neurology, EPEC-N, Train the Trainer program off the ground. They trained over 20 people with amazing feedback, and we will plan on having a similar session this year. I think this is a really cool and important program because these trainers are going to go on to train others in neuropalliative care, and it will have a great ripple effect. Similarly, Roop Gursahani, who has been a leader in neuropalliative care and an amazing advocate in India for a number of years, has gotten one of his dreams off the ground, namely an international neuropalliative care certification course. This will also be an annual offering, and I think is an amazing way for us to really deliver on our goal and our intention to make neuropalliative care a new standard of care for people throughout the world. Lastly, I'd like to shout out to David Oliver, who has been a leader in this field literally for decades, who has been a lead for the International Neuropalliative Care Society with One Neurology Partnership, which is an international group. And he has been part of their global action plan, which is really putting neurologic disorders squarely on the World Health Organization map. And David has been a proponent for making sure that neuropalliative care is part of these plans and informs these plans. I think I can safely say, and others in the audience can feel this, that the tide is really turning for neuropalliative care. When I started in this field about 10 years ago, we were begging and scraping to get people to let us do palliative care. We are now at a point where academic centers, institutions, patients, families are asking for palliative care and asking for neuropalliative care. There's a lot of momentum, and this is true in the world of research, in the world of clinical care, in the world of education. So there really couldn't be a better time to get the society off the ground, and there couldn't be a better time to advocate for the work that we're advocating for. This includes people living with neurologic illnesses and families who are advocating for palliative care, and just like to show off a couple of papers. One is by Liz Salmi, who is an amazing advocate for people with brain cancer and had a PCORI grant. This is one of the papers that came out of that work, but really showing very nicely that palliative care and quality of life issues are things that are top on the minds of patients and families with brain tumors, and that we can and should do a better job in addressing these. The other paper was one that I would say, peripherally involved with, but I really want to give credit to Kirk Hall, Milena Summerall, and Gil Thalen, who are amazing patient and family caregiver advocates who have created a great roadmap for how to do palliative care for people with Parkinson's disease. And I think coming from them, it really is person, family, and patient-centered. Other disease societies and other professional societies are now recognizing palliative care as a mark of high quality care. These are just a few of the guidelines that have come out, one from Canada, one from Europe. The American Academy of Neurology is increasingly including advanced care planning and other metrics of palliative care in their quality guidelines. And I just circled here from the Canadian guidelines that the guideline reflects substantial changes in the literature, including adding information on palliative care. And I think we're going to see more and more of this in the years to come. Our colleagues are increasingly open and, I would say, excited and enthusiastic about adapting palliative care approaches. This is a project that I've been involved in with the Parkinson's Foundation. At the top is a viewpoint paper that I wrote with members of the Michael J. Fox Foundation and the Parkinson's Foundation, as well as patient and caregiver advocates, to talk about the need for palliative care to be part of Parkinson's disease care, and that we as a neurology and a movement disorder society community need to take ownership for it, of course, working in concert with our palliative care colleagues. This project is about 18 months in, and it has been very heartwarming and heart-lifting for me to be doing this work. Across the board, there are now about 40 to 45% of the centers of excellence that have embedded and integrated neuropalliative care, and there is a lot of interest in both improving primary as well as specialist neuropalliative care. So I hope to present more on this work in years to come. We are also continuing to witness an exponential growth in clinical care education research. As you can see in this graph from PubMed, last year, as I predicted, was a record-setting year for neuropalliative care publications, well over 300, and I'm hoping and would predict that this year is going to be record-setting and trend-setting as well. We're seeing similar things in clinical care. When I started 10 years ago, I could count on one hand the number of people doing neuropalliative care clinics. It's now greatly expanded, and there are people available in almost every state and country. And the same is true with both education and research productivity. We're also seeing grants funded by people who have never previously funded grants in palliative care, so an amazing degree of growth. I'd like to call attention really to kind of radical and the roots of this, which is that the awakening of love, kindness, and compassion really is at the heart of this movement. This is a quote from the Dalai Lama: "Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive." And I would say for myself, for other people who I know in this field, this was not part of our career development plan. This was not part of our medical student essay. This really became a calling that came out of dissatisfaction with our current models of care. And I would say for our patient and family members of the society, this is also something that came up as a result of the care they either received or the care they failed to receive. And at the bottom of it is, how can we create true caring, not just healthcare, but true caring that reflects love, kindness, and thoughtfulness to make sure that people and family members with neurologic illness get the best care possible throughout their journey. There has been an increasing attention paid to burnout in the world of medicine, and I would say palliative care is a way to directly respond to some of the moral distress created by impersonal healthcare systems. This is a paper that's one of my favorites by a friend of mine, Ray Dorsey, on the McDonaldization of medicine. And as you can see here in this table, that medicine is increasingly becoming like a McDonald's fast food. So we focus on efficiency and calculability, predictability, and control. And these things, I wouldn't say are diametrically opposed to palliative care, but they're definitely different than our goals in palliative care. And I think one of the things that we as leaders, we as patients, we as family members can bring into the conversation is to bring back the personal element and the human element. And this is very invigorating, I think, for all people involved with medicine, both patients, families, and healthcare providers. I'd like to remind people that our mission is to raise standards of care for all people affected by neurologic illness, and that includes patients, families, and healthcare providers. And our vision is a world where high-quality, person-centered care is available to all people and families affected by neurologic illness. To get where we want to go, we have to build bridges, we have to build communities where others see barriers. And this is truly one of the hallmarks, and I would say is the heart of this society, is that we wanted to create a place where neuropalliative care is the main course, where we're not at the fringes of other societies. And we purposefully created this society as a place where patients, families, geriatricians, palliative care doctors, nurses, chaplains, social workers, I can go on, can come together and talk about what really matters to the care of people living with serious neurologic illnesses. In order to break barriers and build community, we really need a place where we can come together. And that's not just in the society, but it's back after the end of this annual meeting in our real world. And I would call attention to one of my favorite reads over the last year. This book came out earlier, but I read it more recently, Neurotribes, which talks about autism, and it has a very interesting history of autism, but I think more importantly for us is the grassroots activism and the advocacy efforts of people living with autism and their families that really changed the conversation. And I've been thinking a lot about the messages in this book and thinking about how we can apply them to the world of neuropalliative care. So I'm going to go through a list of 12 suggestions. We'll actually make it a baker's dozen of things that we can do to break down barriers and build community. And the first of these is that the role of people living with neurologic illness and their families is not limited to that of patient or care recipient. And there are two big reasons for doing this. The first is philosophical, namely, how can we provide person-centered care? How can we address people with the full amount of respect if we are defining them by an illness and we're treating them as patients? And so in this graph here, you can see the difference between medical-centered and person-centered models. But just to highlight that the goals of person-centered care is to increase autonomy, to increase respect, to increase empowerment. And that's really core to the work that we do. The second thing is practical, in that there is nobody more invested in a patient's well-being than the patient and that family. And if we are not investing in them and we're not integrating them into our care, we're missing out on a huge opportunity to improve care. And we will be hearing throughout this meeting, Chris Tiroli will be leading a patient and family advocate session, and the Courageous Parents Network will also have a presentation about their amazing work on peer-led networks. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I think there's a huge opportunity to really leverage the insights and value and energy and passion of patients and families in improving care. Second, the role of the palliative care specialist is not limited to direct patient care. We'll be hearing from Embry Mehta later in her talk, and this is in honor of Tara Cook, who is also a huge advocate for the role of palliative care and neuropalliative care specialists as educators and as coaches. And in some of the papers that I'm highlighting here, there's some evidence to date, not from neuropalliative care specifically, that peer coaching can be effective in improving care in the community. And I love this paper, which is just getting off the ground, of the use of coaching of patients and families to improve care, which ties back to our first point. Third is that international collaborations will help us to see the limits of our health system and also build data to challenge and change policy. And I'd like to highlight two areas where I was really humbled by my international colleagues. And the first, which was from an international working group that I put together in 2015, and this is a publication from this. I can remember very distinctly a conversation with colleagues from Australia who were describing their palliative care and hospice system. And in Australia, it was very clear that things were driven by needs and not by stage or prognosis. And for me, that was eye-opening, and it made a lot more sense for neurology, and it made a lot more sense than the Medicare guidelines and the Medicare system for hospice. So that's just one example of an eye-opening situation that came about from working with international colleagues. The second is a paper that we published in JAMA Neurology, where we compared outpatient palliative care with standard care. And I want to put aside the trial, which was important in its own right, and call attention to the fact that at baseline, before we did the intervention, that caregivers in Canada were statistically significantly better than caregivers in the United States when it came to caregiver burden. And that's really a reflection of the Canadian healthcare and the Canadian social care system. And so I think, again, it calls attention to the value of having studies that involve international collaborations, because it allows us to identify and really to promote policy changes that will better support our patients and families. Fourth is that palliative care reaches out to deliver care to people where they live. And on this page is a host of papers, including one involving Laura Hansen, who is our researcher of the year, on how reaching out to people in their homes and in nursing homes can be used to improve care. And people in homes and nursing homes are oftentimes invisible to palliative care systems that tend to be focused in inpatient and sometimes in outpatient care. But there is no doubt that going out into the home, we're able to provide care, and that we need to do this because oftentimes our patients are unable to come to us. Fifth, we have to go beyond physician-centered care to maximize the role of all team members. And here again is a couple of trials that I think were excellent and very influential in my thinking. The first is a randomized trial of care management, which is led by nurses in the veterans system in the United States, which showed that it was able to improve Parkinson's disease care quality, including several metrics tied to palliative care. The second is what's been called the care ecosystem model, that's been led by Catherine Possin and colleagues at UCSF, but is one which is driven by a case manager who is typically somebody with just a bachelor's degree. And with a bit of training and support, they are able to help patients and families better navigate our very confusing healthcare system and also improve outcomes. And so again, I think we need to go beyond physician-centered care to really think about what are the different roles and how can we maximally use those roles, going beyond people's traditional roles to maximize patient and family outcomes. Sixth is that we have to make it a priority to care for those with the most barriers to traditional models of care. And I'm very pleased and honored that Alan, who wrote this paper on compassionate communities, is going to be giving a talk on Saturday. And we're going to have other people from around the world talking about this on Saturday, about how we can build out communities that are able to provide better palliative care. And there's work in India, Brazil, and other parts of the world. And I've actually been inspired by this work to think about ways that we can do a better job within well-resourced countries, but that have underserved communities to try to provide better care, in fact, more human care for those people. Seventh, we need to emphasize and optimize the benefits of palliative care to healthcare providers. And I think a lot of times when we are thinking about palliative care, we think about, and this is certainly appropriate, the benefits to patients and families, but there is a great degree of benefits also to our colleagues. And if we don't emphasize the benefits of this to our colleagues are going to be resistant, and they're only going to see the burden of doing palliative care. They're only going to see that this may take them more time, this is going to be more boxes to check, and how am I going to be able to fit this in? This was one paper, which I think is a great paper on communication skills training for physicians. And as the title suggests, it improves patient satisfactions, but I highlighted here that it also improved physician satisfaction. And in particular, they were able to show statistically significant improvements in all measures of burnout, and many of these were sustained for at least 3 months. And so when physicians are able to do meaningful care, when they are empowered to connect with their own natural compassion and kindness with palliative care skills, they find their own work more meaningful. Eighth is that we connect to non-palliative care generalists and specialists through shared values. And Tony Bach is going to talk about this during his presentation, but really emphasizing caring as the heart of what we do in palliative care. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing a lot of work with the Parkinson's Foundation, a lot of work with non-palliative care specialists. And what I'm finding very encouraging is that people really want to provide the best care possible. And whether or not they use the word palliative or supportive or simply high quality care, it all falls under the same umbrella. And in as much as palliative care models and palliative care skills can help people to do this, I think we can find a much larger community and many more bridges to the work that we want to do. Ninth is that we need to go beyond medical models to talk about and advocate for improving the social determinants of health. Kathleen Foley is going to talk about this in her talk on neuropalliative care as both a human rights and a public health challenge. But in our own work in Rochester, we are talking now with lawyers and financial planners, which are things that really impact people's ability and impact people's ability to sleep. These are things that keep people up at night, but they also impact care. And for some of our patients who may not have financial resources, it really impacts care. I can remember a time actually just last week working with a student who found it, literally jaw-dropping to see how much finances, transportation, education, just the area that people live in impacts the care they receive. And so we have to go beyond the biomedical model if we're really going to impact the care that patients and families are receiving. 10th, we need to partner with anyone and everyone who has a role in healthcare delivery. I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln: "I do not like that man, I must get to know him better." Again, in my work with the Parkinson's Foundation, I'm finding a lot of providers have almost learned helplessness or apathy when it comes to working with healthcare administrators. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity. If we can work with healthcare administrators, if we can work with insurance companies, if we can work with other stakeholders, we have an opportunity to build something that we really cannot build on our own. We need people with that economic know-how to be able to build programs that are sustainable. And as we're thinking about the work and research and other things that we needed to do as a society, I think it behooves us to really think carefully about the business side of medicine and to not simply say that we are above talking about medicine or dollars, because medicine and the money in medicine has a big influence on the care that people are able to receive. 11th is that we work to build neuropalliative care services and not divisions. And this is from lessons that I learned both at Colorado and at Rochester. But in academic medicine, even outside of academic medicine, we run into the problem of silos. And if there are multiple divisions and there's a new neuropalliative care division, then there becomes competition for resources. And we also run into problems with coordinating care. And so at Rochester, we call ourselves the Neuropalliative Care Service. And just to give you a few concrete examples of what this means, first is that I am now in the position where I can advocate for the whole department, and I can ask for 1 FTE or 2 FTEs of social work support, rather than seeing every division asking for 0.2 FTE of a social worker. And asking for 0.2 FTE of a social worker is an easy no. Asking for 1 FTE for a social worker with data behind it for a whole department is a much easier yes. Secondly, I really am trying to work with every section of our department to make sure that we can meet their needs. And this could include coaching, this could include education, this could include quality improvement. Every division in our department has a neuropalliative care champion. And so we're working together to try to meet the needs of both providers, patients, and families, rather than trying to build up yet another silo within a department. 12th is that we need to bring a palliative care approach back, and I know we talk about this, but I think we need to do this in a very serious way, to the time and the act of diagnosis. This first paper from 2006 on dropping the bomb has been really influential to me, but I think we really need to recognize that palliative care needs start at, if not before, the time of diagnosis for patients and families, and they start in a very real and a very significant way. I would also call attention to Susan Schneider-Williams' work in this amazing documentary that we'll be seeing tonight called Robin's Wish, which speaks to the importance of diagnosis on the patient and family journey. And I've heard this from multiple people that the act of diagnosis or misdiagnosis was particularly traumatic. And so I think we need to put this squarely center in the work that we do and make sure that our palliative care approaches and models incorporate the time of diagnosis and everything that happens beyond that. Lastly, and as a bonus for the baker's dozen, is that the members of INPCS are ambassadors in caring in other medical and disease societies. And I'm already seeing this happening. I know myself, other members of our officers, other committee chairs are doing this in their societies. But to just give an example of myself, I've been going out with the Parkinson's Foundation, with the Davis-Finney Foundation, with other Parkinson's disease societies, and I've been a voice for incorporating palliative care. I've also been a resource for incorporating palliative care for these societies. And I think as we do this, even though we are currently a relatively small society, we will have a huge effect and a huge ripple effect in all of the various disease societies we're associated with the professional societies, including social work and chaplaincy, and that we will really work to change the world that we're living in. And that's what our work is all about, is trying to make a better world for patients and families living with neurologic illness. And so to close, I hope and wish and pray for all of you that your dreams of better care defy the laws of gravity, that they get off the ground just as the society is getting off the ground. And I look forward on reporting on your great work in our next year's meeting. Thank you so much for your attention.